you mind if I sing this?
I do not. I think it's lovely.
I just kind of inserted
In
myself.
fact, I told him to tell you to lead it.
No. I am not leaving it. You should sing this.
She's very capable.
Yeah, we're ready.
Paz, queremos paz y libertad en este mundo. Let's see if they got it. Paz, queremos paz y libertad en este mundo. 3 of them got it. Let's see if some more people got it. Queremos paz y libertad en este mundo. One more time. Paz, queremos paz y libertad en este mundo. Okay, folks, we're on TV and we have to sound loud and strong. So move your mouths. You have to look good too. One more time. Paz, queremos paz y libertad en este mundo. Paz, queremos paz y libertad en este mundo. Para las niñas de todo el mundo, queremos paz y libertad. Para las niñas de todo el mundo, queremos paz y libertad. Paz, queremos paz y libertad en este mundo. Paz, queremos paz y libertad en este mundo. Para los niños de todo el mundo, queremos paz y libertad. Para los niños de todo el mundo, queremos paz y libertad. Paz, queremos paz y libertad en este mundo. Paz, queremos paz y libertad en este mundo. Ya no más hambre, ya no más hambre, ya no más guerra. Queremos paz en esta tierra. Ya no más hambre, ya no más guerra. Queremos paz en esta tierra. Paz, queremos paz y libertad en este mundo. Paz, queremos paz y libertad en este mundo. All right. At exactly 7:10, we are going to all sing.
That was actually just the warm-up. So you should give a little context to this song. Do you want to talk about it? Okay. So Lucy Murphy is an amazing, as you can tell, singer and performer, and she performs like all of the activities in Washington, D.C., and leads us in song. And you're the D.C. Labor Force as well.
And the Black Workers Center Chorus.
And the Black Workers Center Chorus. And when we were in the Venezuelan Embassy in Washington, D.C., Lucy was often there and taught us this song, Queremos Paz. And so we frequently, when the Embassy Protection Collective frequently sing this song. You want to say anything?
Okay. Peace. We want peace and freedom in this world. The first verse is for the girls of the world. We want peace. And then for the boys of the world, we want peace because Spanish is a gendered language. And then we sing no more hunger, no more war. We want peace and freedom in this world. 7:10?
7:10. So
I don't know somebody
what time
give
it
us
is.
the time.
Yeah, go ahead. It's time? Go ahead.
Ben?
Yeah. Well, you have a few more people coming. Should we let them sit down? Okay, so that was the warm-up. Now you're really on.
We'll start with the chorus. Paz, queremos paz y libertad en este mundo. Paz, queremos paz y libertad en este mundo. Para las niñas de todo el mundo queremos paz y libertad. Para las niñas de todo el mundo queremos paz y libertad. Paz, queremos paz y libertad en este mundo. Paz, queremos paz y libertad en este mundo.
Para los niños
De todo el mundo queremos paz y libertad. Para los niños de todo el mundo queremos paz y libertad. Paz, queremos paz y libertad en este mundo. Paz, queremos paz y libertad en este mundo. Ya no más hambre, ya no más hambre, ya no más guerra. Queremos paz en esa tierra. Ya no más hambre, ya no más guerra. Queremos paz en esa tierra. Paz, queremos paz y libertad en este mundo. Paz, queremos paz y libertad en este mundo. Ya no más bombas con radiación, no más ideas de exterminación. Ya no más bombas con radiación, no más ideas de exterminación. Paz queremos. Paz, queremos paz y libertad en este mundo. Paz, queremos paz y libertad en este mundo. Última vez. Paz, queremos paz y libertad en este mundo.
You want to say something?
Well, we're the Lucy and I are with the People's Music Network, and we are happy to be sharing the building with you all tonight. We're in solidarity with the Embassy Protection Collective. We'll be passing out the postcard that will be passed out tonight upstairs as well to let our people know about it. So good luck to all of you, and if you'd like to know about the People's Music Network, stop by and talk to us upstairs. And the show will be going on upstairs till 10 if you want to stop by for the end of it.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate you coming down.
Thank you so much.
Good luck.
Well, that was a great way to start the evening, wasn't it? Really. Let's thank again Lucy Murphy and Ben Groshek. Thank you. Now, we're meeting on a night, you may not have seen this in the corporate media, but more than 1 million people turned out in the streets of Baghdad today to say U.S. out. That's a real illusion. And we're also meeting at a time when the Venezuelan Embassy Protectors, they've been in the streets in Venezuela at a time when there were hundreds of thousands, and I want to say I was there with them some of those times, hundreds of thousands of people in the streets against the U.S. attempted coup. So it's people's power. And that's going to be reflected tomorrow. There's a demonstration at Columbus Circle. I bet everybody's heard about it at least. Now, whether it rains or snows tomorrow, it's happening in 210 cities now around the world. And it's kind of incredible, because that's not a word in the corporate media, not a word. And that is the kind of confidence we have to have, that we base ourselves on people's power right here. Just to begin the evening, I want to ask Reverend Claudia de la Cruz, who is the executive director of this wonderful space, the People's Forum, to come up and welcome us. And Claudia is from immigrant parents in the Dominican Republic. She's a popular educator and a community organizer, a theologian, and she was pastor of the Iglesia San Romero de las Americas, a community church, and really rooted in liberation theology. So let's turn this over to Reverend Claudia. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. So I'm going to do this because I believe in the call and response. And it's kind of a prayer in the streets. When I say people, you say power. People. Power. People. Power. People. Power. When I say we want, you say freedom. We want freedom. We want freedom. We want freedom. Now you're going to say it like you believe it.
Right. Yes.
When I say people, you say power. People. Power. People. Power. When I say we want, you say freedom. We want freedom. We want freedom. We want freedom. All right. I hope I see all of you tomorrow in the protest. Columbus Circle, 12 p.m. And we're going to keep protesting till the U.S. gets his shitty ends outside of the world.
That's right.
Including the Bronx.
Right.
We want to welcome you to the People's Forum. I've seen a lot of faces that are family, that are continuously coming into the space. This space is unapologetically and proudly an anti-capitalist, anti-imperialist, and anti-patriarchal space. It's a liberated zone in what was at some point, and continues to be, but more so back then, a working class community. Hell's Kitchen, a lot of riots, a lot of working class people standing up for the right of the working class. So this space is a space for the working class, with the working class, and by the working class. And we are very happy and very honored to have the presence of freedom fighters. Because that's, we need to call our people that, people who are willing to risk their lives, because it was at that particular moment when we saw a lot of the Venezuelan gusanos attacking these comrades, physically attacking and trying to avoid them getting very necessary things into the Venezuelan embassy, which they were protecting. And that is an honorable and noble action in the face of war, because that's what the Venezuelan people and the Bolivarian Revolution are facing. The threat of war by the United States of America, which seems to think that somehow they own the continent and the world. And we need to do our task as people living in this country to let our government know that they have no right and have no moral authority to go around the world building war that our poor people, both of this country and abroad, will have to bleed for. And so, again, we're honored to have you here. We think more than anything you are a representation of the struggles of resistance, and therefore we are committed, and we have the conviction that you'll be all right. Because our people will be all right. But it is our responsibility to make sure that that happens. And so, again, on behalf of the People's Forum, we want to welcome everyone here. We want to also invite you to participate in all the events that take place here. We are a multi-use space, and so we have events happening almost every day at the same time.
Right.
And so it's a task, but we do believe it's our revolutionary duty to be able to be a space that convenes and builds bridges among struggles. And so this is part of a continental cry for freedom, and that's how we need to see it. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Reverend Claudia. Freedom fighters, that's what we're here to defend tonight, so true. I want to start by introducing my co-chair for tonight, and that's Margaret Kimberly. Margaret is a senior columnist of the Black Agenda Report. She's on the coordinating committee of the Black Alliance for Peace. She's a national coordinator of the UNAC, United National Anti-War Coalition. And she's going to be back here next Tuesday because Margaret has a book launch for her new book. So that's Tuesday, February 4th. It's called Prejudential: Black America and the Presidents. And it's a study of how each president has participated in this country's complicated and often shameful treatment of black people. And that is what the study is. So join us here next Tuesday for Margaret's book launch and signing. Next Tuesday, 2 weeks. 2 weeks. You're right, February 4th. And without more ado, let me turn this over to Margaret to, I think, introduce Margaret.
Yes. Thank you.
That's often a problem on conference calls, isn't it?
That's right. Margaret K. No, Margaret M. Please fine. Good evening, everybody. Power to the people. Power to the people. I'm very happy to be here tonight in support of our comrades. I saw them in Washington, but by the time I got down there, the embassy was closed, and I was just waving at them through the windows, and we had some crazy plan to get food in, which didn't work. But anyway, but I was trying anyhow. Margaret, my namesake, is, well, everyone here, when you hear about everybody here, you're not going to be surprised that they did what they did, that they took this stand for democracy, for international law, and against U.S. criminality. It's not surprising when you hear about them. So Margaret Flowers, MD, she's co-founder of the Embassy Protection Collective, and she's co-director of Popular Resistance, and she organized the Peace Congress to end U.S. wars at home and abroad. About a year ago, she and others, Kevin amongst them, attended they went as a delegation to Venezuela. And it was very important that people, I don't want to say Americans, because Venezuelans are Americans, USians, make these trips and make their presence known so that people all over the world know that there are folks in this country who oppose their policies. So she and Kevin and others from the U.S. Peace Council sponsored a trip from Black Alliance for Peace and other organizations traveled to Venezuela last year. She's very well known for her activism as an advocate for single-payer national health insurance. She co-hosts Clearing the Fog with Kevin Zeese, and she's a writer as well, and her work appears regularly in places like Truthdig, Counterpunch, Dissident Voice, and of course, Popular Resistance. She's a national co-chair of the Green Party of the United States, and was a Senate candidate as a Green, on the Green Party ticket in 2016. So, gonna have her come up now?
Yeah.
Keep going. Yes, so, without further ado, Margaret Flowers.
Should we keep that one up, or?
We may want to plug something here.
Is it no? Sorry.
Well, this is working.
Yeah, no, but I tripped over this one, so I put it in the right place.
Did that break our stream?
No, it's just
It's a live stream.
it's just the microphones. So, all
Live
right, I think we're good again. Thank you. Well, so my grand entrance, right? First off, I really want to thank the Embassy Protector Defense Committee. Sarah and Margaret are members of that defense committee, and it has been so important for us in facing these charges, these federal charges, that there are people who are organizing to support us during this time. And I also want to thank all the other members here who came down to the embassy, because when we talk about the Embassy Protection Collective, it's huge. It was hundreds of people. There were, we did public events inside of the embassy initially, like every night we had educational or cultural events. And so many people came to those events. At the height of the action, we had more than 70 people staying overnight in the embassy. And then starting on April 30th, when the pro-coup folks took the embassy under siege, and people were no longer allowed to come in, so many people came down and were supportive outside of the embassy. And I can just tell you, for us, that we know it was really scary for the folks who were outside facing the violence and the threats and just the racist, homophobic, misogynist behavior. We were also a little scared inside the embassy because they kept trying to break in.
Right.
And just seeing folks across the street, they're keeping an eye on things, they're in solidarity, and some people who stayed out there all night, and some people who would help out, like when we heard weird noises and we couldn't see what was going on, and they would go and look, and it just, this was really a collective effort, and couldn't have happened without the participation of everybody. So I just want to keep that in mind, that this is a really big, when we say the Embassy Protection Collective, it's a very big group, and thank you so much to all of you who were part of it. So I just want to talk a little bit about kind of why we were there. So as Margaret said, in March of last year, we were part of the U.S. Peace Council delegation to Venezuela, and we arrived there as the power. They had this nationwide power outage, which they determined later on was a result of a cyber attack on their electrical grid. Go figure, the software was developed in Houston, and they tracked the attack to Houston and Chicago. And then as they tried to get it back up again, there were these other attacks inside the country on the infrastructure that kept kind of knocking it out. So we were down there, and we were seeing in the U.S. news all this stuff about there was chaos in Venezuela, and it was crazy, and they couldn't get their power on, and we were down there, and a lot of the power was back. It would kind of come in and out. But things were very calm. They were completely calm. People were just dealing with it. We heard that they were getting dirty water from the rivers because they couldn't get water. But Venezuela actually is one of the largest freshwater sources in the world, and they have a lot of springs. And so people were going to these natural springs and helping each other collect water. So all the things we were hearing in the media were really the opposite of what was happening down there. And that's just true generally. If you hear something in the corporate media here about Venezuela, it's probably not true, including that Juan Guaido is the president. So we were down there, and so Juan Guaido announced that he was the president on January 23rd of last year. He was the president of the defunct National Assembly. It's not actually a functioning body at this point. And the U.S., of course, backed him, and then, of course, all of the U.S. allies like Brazil and Colombia and European nations, Canada, yeah, he's the president. But the coup failed. In Venezuela, really, he was a joke. And he would call a protest and nobody would show up, or he'd cancel it because he knew nobody was going to show up. And so really, the only way they could give the appearance of this coup succeeding was by, in the United States, making it look like it was real, right? So when we were down there, we saw that the UN consulate in New York was handed over to the coup people. and that the attaché offices, Venezuelan military attaché offices in DC were handed over. And folks tried to get out there as soon as they heard what was going on and stop it from happening, and thanks to all of you in New York who were part of that, but they were on the outside, and police had already let them in, so there's not a lot you can do at that point. So in April 9th, I think it was, of last year, the Organization of American States changed its rules so that they could force through a vote to recognize Juan Guaido as the president. Prior to that, the main rule, the normal rule they have is a 2/3 majority to recognize someone as the president of a country, and they couldn't get that. So they just changed the rules and said, okay, we'll go with a simple majority. So what kind of a message does that send to other countries that are part of the OAS? Like, if we don't like who your president is, we'll just change our rules and recognize somebody else. So that was pretty ridiculous. But we knew at that point that they were going to try to take the main embassy. In fact, Juan Guaido's people, Carlos Vecchio and Gustavo Tarre, were actually using the Georgetown, Venezuela building as their address on their website. Like they already had it. So Medea Benjamin was down there first, and folks from Answer, and we got down there the next day and said, you know, can we be in the embassy? Because if we're inside here, we have a better chance maybe of keeping them from giving it over illegally without the permission of the elected government. And the staff said, you know, okay. And so we were initially just kind of staying there and trying to figure out a strategy. And we decided to form the Embassy Protection Collective, Answer, and Code Pink, and Popular Resistance. And then we decided we just needed to get a lot of attention for this, and how do we do that? And so that was why we held the public events. People came and talked about what was happening in Palestine, or in Iran, or Honduras, or, you know, various. We had John Kiriakou, the CIA whistleblower, the night before the OAS diplomats were to leave the country, and we anticipated that if the U.S. government might try to take it over that next day. John Kiriakou gave a talk on an inside view of regime change. And that was so interesting for us to hear, and amazing to have that going on in the embassy. And if you want to hear an amazing talk, it's on the Embassy Protection Collective Facebook page, because he really talked about this whole regime change office that exists inside the CIA and how they operate. So, so that's, you know, we were there to try to stop the U.S. from violating international law. The Vienna Convention is very clear that embassies are inviolable. And we were there with the permission of the elected government. And we were there to try to hold that space while the United States and Venezuela negotiated for mutual protecting power agreements. Because this is traditionally what happens when countries break off diplomatic relations. They find a third country to be the protecting power for their embassy. And in fact, those third countries can offer what's called an intersection, and they can offer some diplomatic services. So this was the solution that made the most sense, and it's something the U.S. I think already has 26 protecting power agreements going on, so it's not unusual. And we knew that the U.S. had asked the Maduro government to recognize Switzerland as a protecting power, and Venezuela was trying to find a country. Eventually they found Turkey that agreed to be their protecting power. And so we said, well, you know, once that agreement is in place, we'll leave. You know, things will be protected, and this will be a path towards peace, because that would start, you know, it would not escalate the conflict, and it perhaps could start more negotiations between Venezuela and the United States to find a diplomatic resolution to what was happening. So that's why we were there. And also, I think I can't speak without mentioning the fact that the United States has been waging war against Venezuela for 2 decades now, ever since the Bolivarian process began. And the unilateral coercive measures or sanctions that the United States is imposing on Venezuela are illegal. They violate international law. They violate the United Nations Charter. And the Center for Economic and Policy Research estimated that in just 2 years, period, 2017 and 2018, those sanctions contributed to the deaths of 40,000 Venezuelans. So sanctions are war. Sanctions do kill, and they're still happening. And the U.S. is still trying to intervene, so it's really important that we do whatever we can to keep speaking out and demanding that the intervention and the sanctions stop. And I'll end there. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you, Margaret.
I'm sorry. Maybe some tape would do.
co-chair, Sarah Flowers, whom you all know, but I'm going to introduce her anyway. Sarah is the coordinator of the International Action Center. She and I are both on the coordinating committee of UNAC, United National Anti-War Coalition. She's also involved with the Coalition Against U.S. Foreign Military Bases. She writes for Workers' World magazine, and she's currently coordinating the Sanctions Kill campaign. Margaret just mentioned that sanctions are war by other means and are deadly, that 40,000 people in Venezuela alone have been killed by U.S. sanctions. And for those of you who may not know, let me just explain a little. When the U.S. imposes sanctions on another country, they don't just say that this country, that the United States won't do business with this country or that financial transactions are illegal. They sanction any other country that dares to do business with the targeted nation. And that means U.S. sanctions are international sanctions. So people in Iran, for example, are dying because they cannot access cancer drugs. People in Zimbabwe, Eritrea, Nicaragua, 30 some odd nations are under U.S. sanctions, which are creating terrible suffering all over the world. And I bring this up to mention the Sanctions Kill campaign. The next meeting is next Saturday, February 1st, at the Solidarity Center, 147 West 24th Street. And it's an international education and mass action campaign. There will be actions across the country the weekend of March 13th through the 15th against U.S. sanctions on 39 different countries, impacting a third of the world's population. So I'm urging you, it's sanctionskill.org?
That's right.
Yes, sanctionskill.org. Check it out, become an endorser, and come to these meetings and help us move forward with Sanctions Kill. And now, Sarah Flowers.
Thank you, Margaret. And all that is because I'm going to next introduce David Paul. But let me ask here, because I see so many people that I think were involved, just to raise your hand if you were inside or outside during those 37 long days. I know there were caravans that went down. There's other people here who've been to Venezuela and in all sorts of solidarity delegations over the years. And I had actually an opportunity to be in Venezuela when Margaret and Kevin were there, and the lights were out the day we landed. We landed many hours late and went into a city without anything except that there was real people's order. And that made a huge difference, because you could know what would happen here if the lights went out. So it really is a very different thing. Even if there's no public transportation, there's no street lights, and yet people are organized. So David Paul is someone who watched for decades how this government has helped to destabilize and overthrow elected governments around the world. That results in poverty and violence and injustice. And so David is one of those people who just responded, you could say, really from the gut, what kind of action. He felt a responsibility to speak out. He was, his third trip to Venezuela was in last year, and he saw the economic crisis, the resulting suffering that was going on of a government that had provided so much and then was suddenly unable to provide some of the most meager supplies. And to protest those sanctions, to protest that shutdown, he joined the Embassy Protection Collective in Washington and was there during difficult times and right up to the arrest in the end. So
let me ask David to come up here and describe his experiences.
I'm gonna sit because of the
Okay.
lights. Hi, I'm going to leave a lot of the details of the embassy, which some of you might be wanting to know more about, for Kevin and Adrienne, and sort of give it a little impression about what brought me there. I live in San Francisco, and probably you're not surprised, but there's many people don't know much about what's going on in the world, and believe a lot what they see in the media. And so I felt a responsibility to, well, in my own journey, to understand what's going on in the world and in other countries, looking at history was very important. And looking at history in terms of Latin America and Venezuela, I always remember this quote by Simón Bolívar from over 100 years ago, of saying that the United States is destined to plague Latin America in the name of liberty. And that same dynamic is still going on, and seen it for so many years. I was in Venezuela, came back from Venezuela on a trip to investigate the effects of the sanctions. And a week later, I heard this webinar call saying, come and make history in the Venezuelan embassy. And it just seemed like a natural thing to flow from what I saw in Venezuela, the injustice, talking to farmers in tears that their jobs, they couldn't sell their products, couldn't get parts for their tractors, people who very worried about their families. They couldn't find medicines for their parents with heart failure, and numerous other things. And when I'm in San Francisco, and that's where I've been, my family, and trying to talk to people, and it seems like I have to start from the beginning. I know I don't have to with most of you, but to talk about, people have this notion that United States' job or role in the world is to defend democracies. It's just the opposite. It's to find them and crush them. Any country that takes an independent economic or political path, and Venezuela is a prime example of that. Also, it's been important for me to explain that if you really step back, we are a gangster in the world. We are throwing our government, not us, but our government, not obeying international law, not obeying the Charter of the United Nations and treaties that we've signed, and just basic plunder and theft around the world. And Venezuela, being the sort of epicenter of this struggle in Latin America, and the US's attempt to try to gain control politically and economically, Venezuela is the target. And the attempted coups, the ongoing attempted coup is part of that, this economic war, which is really economic terrorism. And we saw firsthand in my delegation that it's actually killing people. You don't see bodies lying in the streets, they're in the morgues of hospitals because they couldn't get medicines. They couldn't get dialysis equipment. And I know from working in a hospital for 30 years, if you don't get dialysis, there's no other options, you die. For people that choose that, I don't get to say. And this, so much of this trying to get through to people who know little, may be curious, but all they hear is what I often hear in San Francisco. Oh, I heard that that Venezuela is a horrible place, and where did you hear it? I heard it on NPR. And that's where it stops. They don't look beyond that. And it's the propaganda that props this kind of thinking, this myth that we're doing good around the world. It might be complicated, they're not sure what's going on, but we must be doing good. And I know that's not true, and I know many of you do. It's thick throughout the social media. You see it in films, this normalization of militarization. I didn't know about it till a few weeks ago, this Jack Ryan series on Netflix. You know, the scenario is Russians are putting nuclear bombs in Venezuela, and he's got to root them out. And such a pretext for an invasion. It's more, I haven't clearly more seen. And the main thing is they don't give any context. The critique we hear in the media, you can't find toilet paper, you can't find this, you can't find that. Must be the government. Corrupt, full of, they're incompetent. They never talk about the sanctions. They never say that our government is strangling the economy blockading medicines and food getting in. And it's almost like, I mean, it's not exactly the same, but agencies in this country, you want to get rid of the EPA, you defund it, you take all the investigators away, and then say, look, it's not doing its job, not doing any good, got to get rid of it. And the hypocrisy, I think for me, analogies work, help me understand things and just to see the world. And then I think many people have a basic fairness if you talk to them about things, and the hypocrisy. I always try to talk to people, just if our government received the kind of attacks and threats and blockades and sanctions from another country, we wouldn't tolerate it. We do it to other countries. It doesn't seem like it makes a difference because we have it's a double standard. And I don't think people really see it, but I've always tried to tell people, put yourself in their shoes. If your parents couldn't get medicines that they need for their heart, how would you feel? And there's a million other examples, but that's what we're doing to that country. And during the whole time in the embassy, in talking with my family, they say, why did you do this? And what's going on? Was it worth it? And for me, yes, it was worth it because those people were struggling. And I was so impressed with the dignity and determination of the Venezuelan people just to be free of this kind of coercive measures, these attacks, the threats, economic, psychological terrorism that's on these people. And I was so impressed and came back with a feeling of responsibility to hold our government accountable for what they're doing to this country. And I feel responsibility not to come back and join the re-elect Maduro presidential campaign. It's not so much about Maduro versus Guaido. It's not so much about, and there's a lot of critiques from different sides about what's going on there. It's not about whether Maduro or his government is socialist enough. And I think we should stay away from trying to scrutinize the revolutionary process in Venezuela. They should do this, they should do that. That kind of scrutiny we should put on our own country. Because regime change, if you try to compare the election process, the forms of democracy, we've got a lot to learn from Venezuela and other countries. And so we ought to put that scrutiny on our own country and simply let them live in peace and develop their society the way they decide, independent and free. And that's what we should support, no matter what your specific feelings are about the Maduro government. And that's what I think is a general thought and feeling from people in the Embassy Protection Collective, is to defend the sovereignty and the right of the Venezuelan people to determine their own way of life. And that's why I came there, and I'm sticking with it. Well, I think this whole trial, which I think Kevin and Adrienne might talk more about, is kind of a sham. But I guess we didn't expect much better from a federal court with this administration, with this government. And that's a whole nother fight in itself. But thanks for coming and hearing us out.
Thank you. Before I introduce the last of our embassy protectors, I just wanted everyone to know that this event is being live streamed by Essential Dissent. And go to YouTube, subscribe to Essential Dissent. You'll see a lot of great events like this if you go there. So Wilson has quite an archive of stuff. Let's use YouTube while we still have it. That was the topic of my column this week. I thought it was interesting. Adrienne Pine, I've not had the honor of pleasure of meeting her, but I love this description, a militant medical anthropologist. That's the only kind of medical anthropologist we ought to have, let's face it. And she's worked all over the world, in Honduras, Mexico, Korea, the US, Egypt, and Cuba. She's worked inside the academy, and outside as well. She has worked quite a lot in Honduras, one of the countries that is suffering from a U.S. intervention, which took place during the Obama administration. This is bipartisan, you know. And she's been a spokesperson for the people all over the world who've been impacted by these policies. And she's also, like Margaret Flowers, done research on the impact of our healthcare system, our corporate-run healthcare system, and what it does to all of us and to us as a people. So our next speaker is our defender, Adrienne Pine.
Thank you so much. So I moved to Washington, D.C. on around June 21st of 2009. Just over a week later, the United States-supported coup took place in Honduras against elected President Manuel Zelaya in that country. In the years that have followed, I have seen that country rapidly descend into what I call neoliberal fascism. Some of you, since we're in New York, might have been aware or present at the trial in October of Tony Hernandez in the U.S. Southern District Court of New York, where he was being tried on major drug trafficking charges. This is the brother of the current president, the unelected president, Juan Orlando Hernandez, who is nothing more than a vile dictator, in order to maintain his power after blatantly losing an election in 2017, he and his security forces killed over 40 people and imprisoned hundreds of people illegally for protesting against the illegal seizure of his government. Of course, there was no way they could have done this without the full support of the U.S. State Department, of the U.S. government, just as there's no way that the coup would have stood in the first place without the full support of the Hillary Clinton State Department. So what I have seen happen as a direct result of a U.S.-supported coup in a country that I've been working in for over 2 decades is utterly devastating. I've had countless friends, family members murdered as a result, and I would say again, a direct result of the coup, of the political violence that is tied to the U.S.-supported, again, usurpation of democratic processes. And Honduras wasn't even in a revolutionary process. It was something much less than what was going on in Venezuela. But it was, in fact, precisely because Mel Zelaya had created some initial alliances with Chavez at the time that he was seen as such a threat that he needed to be taken out. Since that time, what we have seen is one after another coup in Latin America, modeled after what I think is a sort of new kind of coup. It's a coup that's draped in constitutional legitimacy. So that happened in Paraguay, of course, in Brazil with a coup against Dilma, and now what's going on in Bolivia is just absolutely atrocious. But it's got this sort of legalistic veneer that is only possible with the full support of the United States government and the Organization of American States, which itself has become a neoliberal fascist organization and nothing more. Now, one thing that I learned in those first few months that I was living in Washington, D.C., was the incredible importance of the interlocked organizations within that town, the think tanks, the universities, like my own, like Georgetown, George Washington, George Mason, that all function as centers of regime change operations, supporting and providing the intellectual legitimacy for violent U.S. policy carried out in and against Latin Americans. And sort of over the past decade, seeing the violence of my own colleagues in supporting regime change against Venezuela. I mean, this has been an ongoing effort at American University, the Center for Latin American and Latino Studies, the Human Rights Program at the Washington College of Law, have time and time and time again invited incredibly violent leaders of the opposition to speak as if they were human rights defenders, and have prevented anybody who has a different perspective from being incorporated in the conversation. And so that kind of violence, intellectual violence, which also, is masquerading as education, I think has really pushed me to a position where I've recognized that just teaching critical thought to my students is not enough. As educators, as academics, as intellectuals, public intellectuals, organic intellectuals, academic intellectuals, we need to put our bodies on the line, because the bodies of all of Latin America are on the line because of our policies, our government's policies that are funded by our tax dollars. And it's harming us as well. These same policies that are usurping democratic practices in Latin America are usurping our own democracy here in the United States. And the hardest hit communities are, of course, Black and brown communities that are having their towns and their cities taken over by, what do they call them, the manager, what happened in Flint? Emergency managers. I mean, this is what you see happening. Exactly what they're doing in Latin America is what they're doing to the most vulnerable and oppressed populations in the United States. And if we don't stand up, if we don't put ourselves at a little bit of risk, we're risking so much more. So for me, it was just such an honor to be part of this fantastic group of people. And I'm so grateful to all of you who were outside the embassy and to all of you who have come here today. I mean, even in a worst case scenario, if we do go to prison, if we do have that year-long sentence and $100,000 per person fine that they're threatening us with, if we have managed to have an impact to support the Venezuelan people in their struggle for sovereignty and against the fascism that U.S. intervention represents, then I will be really, really happy about that. So thank you all.
Thank you, Adrienne. Well, we're coming to Kevin Zeese. Before I introduce Kevin, though, let me just say, I hope everyone here has this postcard. We're going to collect them in a few minutes, but you have a little bit of time. I want to, again, thank Wilton Vaughn and Essential Descent for the streaming tonight, and Sue Harris and People's Video Network and ABEAR for their help in reaching really a much wider audience than all of us here tonight, although this is a great turnout. If you've seen actually these videos, this slideshow as folks are speaking, that was the image really of folks waving from the windows when there was this mob outside. It was really dangerous. It was dangerous for people outside who were gathering again and again, but you could only feel so apprehensive for those who were inside at night as people were trying to break in basement doors, come in windows, come in through the roof. I mean, it really was an incredible 37 days. I don't know how anyone slept, and then when the food and water was turned off, and we would ask, how are you cooking things? And got back a reply, do you know you can make pasta with cold water? that was one response. I thought, okay, they're going to make it. They're going to, they're going to figure this out. and how to hook up batteries and all kinds of things. So this is a pretty resourceful group. And for the folks here, I think that's what you know. That's the most important thing. Are we resourceful when things get really hard? So Kevin Zeese is a co-founder of the Embassy Protection Collective. He's visited Venezuela twice in the past year. And in these visits, he really developed an understanding. Maybe it's a little bit more than a year now. It's probably 2 years. And part of also being an election observer. As I say, the delegation when there was no electricity there, wasn't that sort of what was to come in the embassy too. And in his meetings and conversations, really he was urged to return to the U.S. and explain what was really going on and to act in solidarity. And that is something that I think every one of these 4 individuals have done around the country. They did during all the people who participated inside. And there were a lot of people inside that we also want to salute. And also all of those outside, and the folks who, from all over the country, were sending messages and streaming and making donations and all of that. It's how we build this movement and keep going. So, Kevin Zeese.
Thank you. Well, it's so great to have both of you moderating. I can tell you, we are so honored as 2 Caucasian people when we get it published in Black Agenda Report.
Yes.
It is such an honor, because that is one of the great publications. One of the great publications. If you don't read Black Agenda Report, you're missing really important analysis. It's very important. And I really want to thank all of you for being here. I can tell you that we have traveled in California, in Illinois, Florida. Now we're doing New York. We have New Jersey ahead, Philadelphia, Connecticut, Massachusetts, and everywhere we go, people are coming out. And I'm always amazed at how many people had watched the live stream while this was going on. It's just amazing that the corporate media, and you really got to see how the government controls the media with this. This is like a made-for-TV event. I mean, the conflict was every day for 37 days. You had this violent mob of racist, homophobic, anti-female, horrible coup mongers, and you had these peace activists outside as well, conflict with them, us inside, trying to bring food up through the windows and through the garage. It was just, and the police helping the mob, the coup mob, is just crazy. I mean, postmen tried to deliver food and were stopped, from delivering food for us. Amazon tried to deliver food and was stopped from delivering food. So it was quite, but it was all blacked out. It wasn't until 4 people arrested at the Venezuelan embassy. That's the story. None of the context of 37 days and why we were out there, or who we were. I mean, as I said, I was in Venezuela for the re-election of President Maduro. And I was there with hundreds of election observers. There were more than 300 election observers. I was actually there more as, they brought me down as media, a media group in California, subsidized my trip to go down as a reporter. I never think of myself as a reporter, but people always tell me I'm a journalist. I don't think of myself that way, but I appreciate that people will see that. And one thing that the 300 plus international election observers all unanimously agreed on was that election met all the standards of democracy under international law. Unanimous. And we call it a dictatorship. I've been an election integrity activist in the United States as well, working to end these unverifiable electronic voting machines. And I can tell you the Venezuelan elections are run much better than US elections in many states. First, they have a 95% plus registration level. 95%, they're trying to get to 100%. Because the right to vote is in their constitution, unlike ours. And so they have to make that right something that people can actually exercise. So the government takes responsibility for registering people. Here, our government takes responsibility for deregistering people. It's a kind of an interesting difference. And they do some amazing, I can talk a long time about Venezuelan democracy from the grassroots up, direct participatory democracy, which is an amazing experiment that they're trying to build to a future way of rule, direct democracy rather than representative democracy. It's an amazing story. But I'll just say about the elections, They do several things that no other country does. First off, they start with a fingerprint. Every voter, fingerprint to start, fingerprint to finish. So there can be no fraud. It's impossible to have fraud at the vote. The second thing they do is that no other country does. At the end of the election day, before the vote is officially counted, 54% of the machines in every precinct are randomly selected for a hand count because they have both an electronic vote and a paper vote. And so people they vote electronically, they get a paper ballot, they look at it, put it in the ballot box. At the end of the day, 54% of the machines in each precinct randomly selected, they take a ballot, they show it to all the parties running, the public, the media, they show every ballot, they count them all. Every ballot is counted. And if the ballot count is the same as the electronic, good, they count the electronic. If not, they count every ballot. In the United States, we fight audits. We fight recounts. There, it's part of the system. And we call it a dictatorship. Our democracy? Really? I mean, really? We have two parties run by Wall Street. I mean, we call them a dictatorship. So anyway, let me get back to the Venezuelan embassy. I can talk about democracy for a long time. But on the embassy, I'll start focusing on the end of the time you were there, because we've heard the beginning, you've seen pictures here of how we decorated the embassy with our message, so that we knew that we wouldn't get a lot of media, but we wanted to make sure that there was a picture taken, our message was displayed. And so we spent we had great art bills, you've seen some pictures of the kids making artwork, and we cut up an old banner from our campaign to end the Trans-Pacific Partnership. That big no coup banner was stop the corporate coup, stop the Trans-Pacific Partnership. We cut that up and sewed it and made it into an appropriate banner for this embassy. So we made an effort to make sure we got our message out with a little media. And it went great for the first few weeks. I mean, you see these massive forums we had. But then there was a coup attempt in Caracas on April 30th. And we got word that coup was happening. We were told that they expected they could handle it in Caracas with no problem, and they did. Within 2 hours it was over, but that we should expect problems at the embassy. And in fact, there were problems at the embassy. Amy Goodman was out there that morning and interviewing us, and as we were leaving, the opposition started showing up, and we had a very intense conflict that day. Margaret, we were blocked at the front of the embassy, and they were trying to come over us, and we had to block the embassy front. It was a real conflict, and we had to keep things calm. So Margaret sang for like 8 hours. It was incredible. All these peace songs and movement songs. It was like every time things started to get a little riled up, Margaret would get the mic and start singing, and we'd all join in. So it was an amazing. And we were out there, and Kay was out there. Oh man, that was amazing. It was an amazing scene. And we stayed out overnight. We were out there overnight to protect that.
David was there.
I wasn't saying.
Well, I could go through every person here and say great things about them, because these were great comrades. Each one of them brought incredible talent and experience, and they're all great spokespeople too, for the cause. And we're trying to use this case to build the movement and raise consciousness. And no matter how this case turns out, whether we end up in jail or end up acquitted, whether we get a fair trial or an unfair trial, we are going to use this federal prosecution to build the movement to stop this coup, because Venezuela is not going to lose its independence. And that's not me talking, that's the Venezuelan people talking. They will not lose their independence. And when they succeed, the Monroe Doctrine is finished. The end of U.S. domination of Latin America. That's what this is about. That's what this is about. And so, as the coup starts to develop, the people are now we're surrounded by a mob outside. I mean, a siege mob. They are blocking food from entering the embassy. People try to bring food. They get blocked. People try to throw food. One of the Code Pink folks, Ariel Gold, tried to throw some lettuce up, and she was arrested for throwing a missile. You can see you may see the picture here of Jerry Condon, the President of Veterans for Peace, bloody face. He was trying to throw me a cucumber. We were on the second floor. They were down there trying to get food. We would throw a bag out, and they would put the food in the bag, but there was just too much melee going on. It couldn't work, and so I saw Jerry had a cucumber, so I put my hands out like that, and he started to throw the cucumber, and he was on the ground. Bloody face, and that was the last day that the Secret Service was out there. When they did that to Jerry Condon, they were gone. And things did get better when the Secret Service left. But that violent attack on the President of Veterans for Peace was a tremendous political error by the Secret Service. And so we're in this situation now where the coup mob is surrounding the embassy, where they've broken in the windows and come into the embassy. We had one guy break in the window, go to the third floor, barricade himself in, and we had to deal with the problem of how do we let the police in? They can't violate the embassy under international law. Under the Vienna Convention, embassies are inviolate. The host country cannot come in. And so what do? We had to negotiate with the Venezuelan authorities to get permission for a limited waiver of inviolability, negotiate with the police, how we did it, how, who could go with the police, and what they could bring. And so 2 cops came up, got the guy out. Our people filmed him. Did you film it? I'm not sure who filmed it. One of our folks filmed the whole process of this guy being removed. And so and then they broke a door in the basement, so we couldn't close the door anymore. We had to blockade that door with wood. We found some old doors. We blockaded that door. We had a van. One of the embassy personnel left a van in the garage. We had the keys. We parked the van up against the door to stop it from being pushed in. They still found ways to get in. You slept down there.
So did we.
Yeah, we slept. We all took turns sleeping in the garage.
They tried to break in?
When they tried to break in, so we could be aware. And I know when it was near the end, Margaret was hoping they would try to break in. She wanted to slap their hands so bad when they were pushing that door aside, but they didn't.
I was just ready. Because they would stick their arm through.
We're very peaceful. We're very peaceful. And so that was the constant conflict. And we heard them outside, the pro-coup people, on the telephone, saying that they were trying to terrorize us out. They were telling their allies that's what they were there to do, trying to terrorize us out, because they knew that the police could not come in unless they violated the law. So they had to terrorize us out. So it was blocking our food, then they turned off our electricity, then they turned off our water, and that made us more in solidarity with Venezuela, because when we were in Venezuela, we saw the same kind of tactics. Food being blocked, medicine being blocked, lights, electricity, water. So we felt, we were living a small piece of what they've dealt with. So it was incredible solidarity. And that was one of the beautiful things about this, the solidarity we got from Venezuela. We had this pro-coup mob out there, which was a mixture of Venezuelans, Nicaraguans, Cubans, right-wingers who had fled their countries when progressive and left governments came in. They fled, and now they were in the United States. That was the pro-coup mob. And there's some great research done on who these people were: defense contractors, lobbyists, big PR firms, moneyed interests who would profit from a coup. That's who was out there. And so when we saw these marches, solidarity marches for us in Venezuela, oh my God. I mean, with the coup out there, Margaret, you're a hero. David, you're a hero. I didn't see a Kevin, you're a hero. Until I was giving a lecture. I was giving a lecture. I know. I was giving a lecture in California, and there was we had on this slideshow. I don't know if it's still up there or not. A little picture where I saw Kevin's a hero. So anyway.
You're a hero. Don't worry, you're a hero. Kevin, you're a hero.
That's okay. But it was really, and they would send. Oh my God, the love song they sent for Adrienne.
Oh my God.
Oh my God, Adrienne! Oh my God, it was an amazing love song that was sent, I think, from Cuba. Oh my God, it was amazing. It was beautiful. It was beautiful. So we got these songs, and all the people were just. And so the cuckoo out there, and we're getting that from the internet. Oh my God. So anyway, where am I? So it's getting bad, so the coup tries, and the mob is out there. We're getting under siege, and more of our people are showing up. It's fantastic. And then at some point, the few days before we get arrested, the police decide to give us an eviction notice. It was a very strange eviction notice. It was on an 8.5-11 piece of paper. First of all, they put them all on the walls, and we couldn't really read them because we were inside. But they did they read it on a loudspeaker too, so we could hear it. And they did come to the door, and our lawyer, Mara Verheyden Hilliard of Partnership for Civil Justice, a great source in Washington, D.C. We've done some fantastic work together.
And the AG.
And then, I'll get to that in a second. So the eviction notice comes, and it's on this 8.5-11 piece of paper. No agency, no letterhead, no signature. It mentions this guy, Carlos Vecchio, who we knew was a former oil executive, who's now, by the way, being investigated for embezzlement from Citgo by the U.S. Department of Justice. We knew that he was pretending to be an ambassador as part of the failed coup. And it's such an amazing thing, this coup. Most open coup in U.S. history, and it's failed and failed and failed. It's so embarrassing for the United States. This guy Guaido, I mean, and then what, the New York Times? I mean, what is with them? Did you see this report in the New York Times? Did you see this phony thing, Guaido climbing the fence of the National Assembly? You know, he was actually, there's a video of him, you can come in, Guaido. You want Guaido? Come on in. He wants to climb the fence. You know, and so the New York Times has an op-ed, an opinion piece about it. The heroic climb of the fence by Juan Guaido has ignited new international support. The heroic climb? It's a tragic comedy. It's not a heroic climb. Oh my God. But that's the New York Times. And the Washington Post is equally bad. I mean, and I'm ashamed that our media and our judge are reading this media, the judge, the jury, they're reading this crappy media of lies. It's just, so it's a real challenge for our court case. But anyway, so they give us this eviction notice. Mara had negotiated that we would do it at the front door. We'd wait in the lobby. They cut the chains that were put on by the Venezuelan embassy staff. They cut the chains, cut the chains, opened the door. They came to the door. They didn't walk into the embassy. They put the eviction notices on the ground in front of us, and they said, would you voluntarily leave? We said, no, we're not going to leave. We're here legally. We are here with the permission of the elected government of Venezuela. Yep. Margaret said, here's my key. We said, if you come in, you're violating the Vienna Convention. You're violating the law. We're not violating the law. And if you violate that law, it becomes the law of the jungle at embassies around the world. What that means is, if a U.S. embassy is attacked in a year or 2 years, if embassy personnel are attacked in a year or 2 years, think back to this moment when you crossed this threshold. When you violate international law and set the standard of the law of the jungle rather than the rule of law. And we said that there's right now a conflict between Venezuela and the United States, Colombia and Brazil on the side of Venezuela, they border Venezuela.
No, side of the U.S.
On the side of the U.S. I always do that.
I know.
Colombia and Brazil on the side of the U.S., China and Russia on the side of Venezuela. And we're trying to de-escalate this conflict because a conflict in Venezuela could first of all become a regional conflict with Colombia and Brazil and a global conflict with Russia and China. Do you want to cross that threshold, violate international law, and escalate that conflict and tell your grandchildren you're the one who started this global conflict? Do you want to really do that? And we told them, it's time for you to go back to your superiors and tell them that we have to rethink this because it's a major step regarding violating international law. Shockingly, they turned around and left. And we realized that we were right. We were there legally, and they were there illegally. So we knew our lawyer's advice, and that day, by the way, we got a fantastic letter organized by the National Lawyers Guild. More than 500 lawyers signed on a letter saying that we were in the embassy legally, that our human rights should be respected, and the Vienna Convention should be respected. National Lawyers Guild steering committee member right here, they're one of the sponsors of this event, and we really appreciated that. That was fantastic. The same day we get the eviction notice. So who do we believe? This eviction notice with no letterhead, no signature, and a fake ambassador, or the National Lawyers Guild, our lawyer, the people in Venezuela. Who do we believe? And so we stayed, and we didn't know what the government was going to do next. Were they going to violate the law or not? And so the next day, was the next day? 2 days. 2 days later, Jesse Jackson shows up. Jesse Jackson is about 80. He has Parkinson's disease. He's struggling. He showed up for us. And Parkinson's has a hard problem with your vocal cords, and so he had a hard time speaking. So we did like a mic, the people outside did like a mic check for the press conference. He would say something, the people would repeat it to the press. After he finished that, Copen gave him 3 bags of food. You can see pictures in here. Well, that's me, when the power was out, we said we're still staying. After that, he walks these 3 bags of food over to the window, and we're at the window. Should we throw the bag out to get the food? There's a big crowd of pro-coup mob, this big Black Alliance for Peace, and other of our supporters are out there. trying to position with the pro-coup mob. The cops are watching, not sure what. You can sit down on the floor if you want. It's getting kind of crowded. The pro-coup mob is, fighting with that. And so at one point they say, throw the bag, throw the bag. So I threw the bag. They grabbed it. One of the pro-coup guys wrapped the rope around his arm. Our people are trying to get the rope off. Ajamu Baraka, our vice presidential candidate for the Green Party, my kind of vice president, fights for our food. He's out there. He's trying to grab the rope off the guy's arm and to get the bag free. We fill it up, pull it up 2 floors, and we have food. I mean, we never ran out of food, by the way. David Paul was a Nazi when it comes to.
Stop. Be nice. Don't use that.
Was a hardliner.
A tyrant.
A tyrant when it came to keeping our calories down. We all lost weight. I lost 10 pounds. You lost 8, 12. I mean, she didn't count. We all lost weight, but we never ran out of food. We just kind of had limited food. Lots of peanut butter and jelly. We made these fantastic burritos with tuna fish. Tuna fish in the can. Seafood tacos. You heard about the fantastic pasta from cold water. You let it sit for a few hours. It's just like hot water. Didn't work for rice though. That didn't get better. That rotted with the water. And we also, by the way, when we were running out of electricity, we would go into the car to charge our phones. And when the car was getting hot, we would cook food on the engine. And so we did that. We also had a solar cooker on the roof. And anyway, also the Embassy Protectors cookbook. If you want to sign up for it, it'll be coming out in the future. So feel free to sign up for that. So anyway, when Jesse broke through, that was a sign for we could have a lot of other people break through. Because Jesse, that's one of the roles he's played in history. Is he comes first, then others follow. And so maybe Tulsa would have come, maybe Mike Gravel, maybe some celebrities would come. Also Roger Waters. When you saw that picture of me doing that, did this when the electricity. We did a live stream saying we're still here with the lights out. Roger Waters then did a video himself of In the Dark, saying support us and eating beans out of a can to show solidarity with us. So things were breaking through. And it meant that the media was also trying to break through with Jesse showing up. And Jesse promised to come back with more preachers that Sunday. And so before Jesse came back, they decided to break in and arrest us. And I say break in. They could have just cut the plastic cuffs they put on the front door when we had our first confrontation. But instead, they brought a battering ram, 100 police plus, 5 different police forces, military gear. We had sent an email to them saying we're not going to resist, we're not going to hide, we're not going to barricade ourselves. If you come in, we will not resist. And we will take care of it later. Your illegal arrest will be accounted for later. And so we were not. So they knew we weren't going to resist. And they still came in with this military police force, battering ram on the door. They called that morning, just after we finished breakfast. I get a phone call. This is the police. We have an arrest warrant for you. Come out now, or we're coming in. I said I'm calling my lawyer. I called Mara. She's trying to get there as quick as she could, and we started hearing the battering ram. Bam! It was like, the building was shaking. And they got in, 20, how many cops were in the conference room? 17 cops in the conference room with the 4 of us. A bunch more outside on the roof and on everywhere. And, we didn't resist. Margaret gave them a lecture. Margaret didn't stop talking. She gave them a lecture about the Vienna Convention and that they were illegal. It was a great lecture. It was a great lecture. And we tried to tell them they were breaking the law, but they continued anyway. And we were arrested. They could have taken us to the magistrate that day. The magistrate meets in Washington, D.C. at 1:30. It was about 9 o'clock in the morning. Instead, they took their time and took us to a police precinct, held us there for a few hours. And then they took us to central booking, held us overnight. They could have done it all in one day, but they wanted to give us a night in jail. So we got a night in jail, no charge, free, with free food, fantastic bologna and white bread. Did we have cheese on those? No cheese, just bologna and white bread.
I didn't eat those.
Oh, it was great. I don't know how people in prison deal with that. It's just, how we treat prisoners in this country is a disgrace. It's just a disgrace. And we saw just a piece of it. But I remember this was my first arrest, which was a medical marijuana arrest when John Ashcroft was in. I'm so talking too long. Anyway, so we've been arrested. We're facing federal charges. The charges we're facing are interfering with protective function, and that's a very strange charge. They didn't charge us with trespass. They didn't charge us with unlawful entry because we didn't do either. So we're charged with interfering with protective function. We thought we were the Embassy Protectors, so we find it an unusual charge. But we're in a situation where the Trump prosecutor is saying we can't tell the jury Maduro is president, that he can't be told that Guaido's not the president, they can't be told that Vecchio's not really an ambassador, they can't be told that we were there legally with the permission of the embassy, of the elected government of Venezuela. We can't be told that there was a mob that was threatening us on the outside, blocking our food. None of that's allowed. That's what the Trump prosecutors want. We'll find out on the 29th if the judge agrees, and I'm a little worried she will agree. So we may have a kind of a trial where the whole truth and nothing but the truth will not be told, where the jury will wear the blindfold of justice in a new way, not of unbiased blindfold, but of ignorance, a blindfold of ignorance. And so we've been doing this tour not just to raise conscience, but also to raise money for our legal defense fund. We have a fantastic defense team. The committee that we were so happy when this committee formed, because it was the four of us against the United States, and to have the community come together and support us was just a fantastic thing. It's been fantastic everywhere we've gone. We so appreciate people's support. And as I said, we are using this prosecution, no matter how it turns out, to continue to build the movement to stop the Venezuelan coup, stop U.S. domination of Latin America, end the Monroe Doctrine, and lead to an end of U.S. interventions around the world. It's time for that to end. So, thank you all very much for coming. Really, sorry I talked so long.
It's because Kevin's a lawyer, so. Very important. So we're into a really important part of this meeting. For everyone who came, you all knew you were coming to a fundraiser. Margaret, help me out here.
Yes.
Okay, so I want to raise, first of all, how much we've already raised. And after we get to this part, we're going to go to the Q&A. And I'm sure everyone here has lots of questions. But before you ask them, let me thank Joseph Zachariah, who has been on the door all night, taking up the collection and helping in so many ways on this. And he tells me we've so far raised tonight $790. That's pretty good. That's pretty good. It means we're more than halfway there with our goal tonight, which was to raise $1,500. $1,500. So we're going to see, now it might go really easy. There might be someone here who's going to donate $500. That might happen. And then it's much easier because some people maybe can't give another penny. Although everybody here is going to give another penny. I guarantee everyone here is going to give another few dollars. But we want to see, does everyone have the envelope on your chair?
You should have the envelope and a card.
Does
Does anybody not have an envelope? Can you sit on it? Anybody need an envelope? You need?
All right, take out that envelope.
Does anybody? Every receipt is taken. There should be.
There might be a few around. But let me see, is there anyone here who can make a donation of $500 for this? Put your hand up. Okay, that's not happening. We're going to reach this $1,500 though. We are going to do it. I think we're really going to do it. Is there anyone here who can do $200? $200 donation. Could be from yourself, could be from an organization, that would be good.
What do you tell us about legal fees and what this is costing? What is the billable rate?
Well,
that might help if you
got to
told
know
people
this.
what we're up against.
well, you know, we're very lucky to have a great legal team. We have 2 appointed lawyers and 2 retained lawyers. John Zwirling is one of the lawyers. He's been practicing criminal law 52 years. And Michael Satin is one of the other retained lawyers. He was a former public defender who trained public defenders in the federal court there. He now represents corporate criminals at a very high rate of hourly charge. But and we have 2 great appointed lawyers who are also doing well. So it's a joint defense team that's been working pretty well together. We're now getting into this point of trial. And that's when things get expensive. And our goal was to raise $60,000. We're getting close to that. That's why they set the level that they set it at. And it really, it's been amazing around the country to see people donating. 25, 50, 100, 200, 500, incredible. And we've been able to gradually build up to this level. So without, a defense fund, you can't have a defense. It's just the reality of U.S. so-called justice. And I do.
Okay.
I'm glad you asked.
See?
USPC, Peace Education Fund.
USPC, Peace
That's United States Peace
Education
Council.
Fund, right. So, checks, now let's see. Is anyone putting in $100?
Wow.
Great. Oh, there's a defendant right there. There's a defendant who,
Who's been released.
in Ireland, they're giving some real
We've
defense.
had around here.
Right, thank you.
Kevin, up
Is
there.
that another $100 donation?
Kevin, up there.
Okay.
In the back.
Who was up back here? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, now we're gonna get down to any $50. Great, thank you.
Kevin, right there.
50,
Kevin.
and right up here, thank you.
Thank you so much.
This is helpful.
All right. We get there.
$50 over here, thank you. Great.
Have we found the level?
We're gonna count it, nobody will be out the door until it's 15.
Is the Bolivian hat, by the way, in honor of the Evo Morales?
We really play rough here. Okay, we're getting there. All right, everybody else has your envelopes out? Let's see, there's some more that are like
Cash is welcome
25?
too. Thank you so much.
25, okay.
Oh,
Let's
wow,
put
wow,
some-
thank you. This is a good corner.
This is a relief.
Thank you
I didn't really want to block you all in here, the embassy barricaders, I don't know.
When Ralph Ayer does this, he asks for
Kevin, over there.
$1,000, and he waits.
All right, I know, I really should have waited on the 500, I should have done it.
Kevin.
Breaks the
So
silence.
we-
It works every time.
And for those of you
I gave
who
in
don't
too
have
early.
a,
I said I gave in too early.
oh, I see. For those of you who don't have a checkbook with you or cash, you can go directly to the website. You can make it, everybody's got a cell phone on them, right? Okay, this website is, somebody
Defend
tell me.
Embassy Protectors.
Embassy
Defend
Protectors.
Embassy Protectors.
DefendEmbassyProtectors.org.
Thank you so much.
Let us see us. Very good, thank you. It's on the bottom of the card, defendembassyprotectors.org. You can pull out your phone, go to the website, defendembassyprotectors.org, and you can make a donation that way. You can also make a donation here online, correct?
Yes, if you just, on your way out, if you come to the laptop.
Thank you so much.
It's just ready, put the information and it goes through.
Yeah, you could actually go over right now. That's right.
That's true, you don't have to wait. Act now. Be the
Right.
person on your block to.
That means, did Margaret go upstairs?
She did.
Where's
Margaret, she went upstairs.
Oh, good.
Margaret F.
That is just
See,
what
there we
she
go
should
again
do.
with the Margaret confusion. So defendembassyprotectors.org, and you can make an online donation. I see people whipping out their phones, that's very good.
And we're gonna ask Joseph to do a counting while we're in the Q&A. So we see if we get out the door. I think folks think I'm kidding, don't you? All right, we're gonna block the door, aren't we, Margaret?
We'll link arms like we did.
$1,500.
You know, when
We're gonna do
when I
this.
went to the embassy after the siege had begun, I had all these crazy thoughts about getting food. I was like, maybe ninjas with, food in backpacks could jump in the windows or something. I had all these crazy ideas, which they were crazy. Nobody listened to me. That's a good thing. But and it's a funny thing. Well, it's not funny. It's the way they do things. They always arrest people on a Friday. They always do that. Especially if they want to get you. They want to make sure they don't make it easy. They make it as difficult as possible. That is why they need good lawyers. And that is why we need more contributions to the defense fund.
Now, the next court hearing is Wednesday, this coming Wednesday, January 29th. As I say, that's where the government is going to be arguing that they can't even bring up, they can't even testify that they were in the embassy with the permission of the elected government of Venezuela. They can't even bring up that they were surrounded by a coup mob. They can't even bring up that the electricity and water was turned off. So these are the real restrictions that have been put on them. Our next thing is, does everyone have this postcard? I know this is an age when everything is on your phone, but does everyone have a pen in your pocket?
If not, borrow one.
A pen, because we want you to sign it and then pass it to the front, and we're going to put stamps on it tonight. Stamps on it, and we're going to put it in the mail. And between upstairs, you got to sign your name. Wait, right, you want one black one,
On the back of the card it says "from," and that's where you put your name.
Okay, when you say, but you said sign, you want a signature, or is my name and address okay?
I think it's name.
Your name and
address.
city. At
Whatever
least
you like.
city. It doesn't have to be your personal address, but your name and your city.
Right.
Yeah?
And these are going to the U.S. Attorney, to the prosecutor's office, demanding that charges be dropped. So if you could quickly put your name and address where it says "from" and pass these to the front, and we're going to put these in the mail.
We want to put more than 100 in the mail tonight. Post office is close enough. It's like 3 blocks over. So this is, it's a goal, like the 1,500, you know, the 100 postcards.
We need our address or just our name?
Yes.
Your name and city. City, New York is good enough. Jersey City, where I'm from, that's good enough, you know. But everybody, fill one of these out. They're going to be filling them out upstairs too. Okay. All right, and before we go into Q&A, I think there are a couple of announcements. One we already gave, and that is that Margaret Kimberly has a book signing Tuesday, February 4th, with her new book. Everyone should really try to come. The next meeting of the Sanctions Kill campaign is going to be next Saturday, February 1st, at the Solidarity Center, and it's an international campaign for education and action against all U.S. imposed sanctions. Now on 39 countries, a third of the population of the world is under U.S. sanctions. It's a real crime, and it just means everything is being shut off around the world. So that's very much, and also in 1 month, in this whole, all 3 floors, is going to be the United National Anti-War Coalition, the National Conference. That's on February 21st, 22nd, and 23rd. So let me, when we give out those flyers.
We can take a Q&A, I thought, right?
Oh, wait, there's one more announcement. Wait, another announcement.
Real quick, Sarah just made several announcements. Tomorrow at noon, Columbus Circle, February 1st, Sanctions Kill, UNAC conference here, the weekend of February 21st. And there is a great international conference for the normalization of U.S.-Cuba relations, which will be held at Fordham School of Law, which is near Lincoln Center on 62nd Street, March 21st and 22nd. There's 2 websites here, us-cubanormalization.org and CubaC, NYNJcoalition.org. So that is thank you very much. And more information. Yes.
Yeah, we're going to do.
This could take forever.
Yeah, we're gonna do a few announcements. We're gonna do Q&A, if that's okay. You can, but raise your hand as part of the Q&A. No, we'll put the stamps on. Bring them to the front. Just sign them, and we have a roll. Believe me, we came prepared. We have a roll of stamps. And before it goes to the post office, I promise your card will have a stamp. That's part of where your donations go to. You know, the defense committee has to pay lawyers, but it also has to cover things like postcards and stamps and,
internet work and other things like that, so.
Just your name and your.
Name and your address, or the address can be just your city.
City.
Say New York, or? Yes, all right. So, Tuesday, January 28th, Brooklyn for Peace. What is happening in Bolivia and why it matters. Tuesday, January 28th, 7 to 9, Brooklyn Commons Cafe, 388 Atlantic Avenue. And it looks like you've got flyers too. Okay.
Pass them around. Okay. All right.
So, questions? Who's got questions, comments?
Yes, yes, I have just one question. I'm part of one of our teams that usually does security with delegates coming from Venezuela and from Cuba. And usually we can identify, the designer's when they come. But my question is, during that whole time there, did you guys take any pictures of them so that we'd be able to identify them in the future? And if you did, just see me afterwards. You don't have to answer that right now.
Can I answer that for a second? I'll say something.
Okay, I'm gonna let Kevin answer this, but for the most part, we wanna take a whole bunch of questions, then have some answers, and
That's a good
then
idea.
we'll get some more time and get some more questions going. Just so we get a lot out there, because there's a lot of hands.
Yeah, that's
You want
fine.
to answer that short?
I'll just be short and say that we had some pro-coup people at our last event in Florida. 3 of them showed up. One of them was wearing the 7-star flag, which is a sign because that's pre-Chavez. After Chavez, it's 8. And so we knew they were there. We warned our allies that were organizing that they were pro-coup people. And Margaret and I said we were going to say some things that would make it so embarrassing for them to talk that they would be quiet. And we laid out exactly what the pro-coup mob was like as far as their racism, their misogyny, their homophobia, their violence, how they couldn't win elections, how they were barely human. And at a certain point, the 3 people got up and left. They didn't have the courage to say anything. And so if you identify them, they're pretty cowardly. All right, now let's take a series of questions.
Okay. I see a couple of hands right here.
Where's the other mic?
See, I have 2 questions. I wonder if you could explain what you meant when you said the treatment of Jerry Condon was a political mistake. And also, I understand, I think the Trump administration is right now on some level dealing with the Maduro government just because they do it on a practical matter, which means that there's a huge contradiction there.
Exactly.
So maybe you can talk about that.
Next, you had a question?
Yeah, I'm sorry to sound naive, but in what court exactly are you not allowed to present a defense, basically?
Okay.
This one.
Any other questions or not?
Yeah.
Should we answer those or take more?
Just take those 2
Any,
first.
are there other questions?
Let's do that for now, and then let other people think about it.
Well,
Okay.
we can pick a few of them.
Right here?
Cool.
Yeah.
I'm gonna get a mic. To what extent recording?
Can we use that mic?
Yeah, well, because we're recording.
Recording. To what extent is the massive arming of the people,
Oh, yeah.
the militias, contributing to the United States being forced to negotiate? I mean, and also, the second part of the question, if they do dare invade, Colombia will explode as well. It's already beginning to organize, so just that.
Great questions. I'll give us a mic.
That's 3.
That's 4.
You have the mic? Oh.
I will tell you, before we go into the second round of questions, everybody gets to go home tonight because we've collected $1,630.
Okay, well, do you guys want to answer these questions?
No, not that one.
Do you guys want to answer any of these questions?
Start there first.
Okay. So we're in federal court, U.S. District Court in Washington, D.C., and it's not unusual in federal trials for a motion in limine, which is what the motion we'll hear on 29th. Motion in limine is essentially the rules of the trial. And what can we talk about, what can't we talk about. In political cases, it's very common for those motions to keep key information from the jury, because in these political cases, the jury knew what was really going on, they would acquit. The only way you can get convictions in these political cases is by misleading the jury, and so that's not unusual. for that to happen. What were some of the other questions? Anyone else remember? What were the other questions, sir? Why condoms was a political mistake. Here you have a 72-year-old guy who's trying to throw a cucumber, and he's attacked by the mob and the police, brought to the ground, face is bloody, cameras are on it, it's shown all around the world. The world is seeing, this is how the U.S. treats veterans who are trying to get food to people who are exercising their political rights to stop a coup. It was not a good political move. And so that was the end of the Secret Service. They were not there any longer. Was
They
there
were
another?
replaced by.
Yeah, they're replaced by the Metropolitan Police. Yes, this is a very critical question on the Trump administration dealing with the Maduro government because it shows the lie. Many of the countries that have recognized Guaido are negotiating with Maduro. So they say Guaido is the president, but they know Maduro is the president. And Elliot Abrams has said that the reason Guaido is not president because Maduro is still in power. He said it before he went to the embassy, and he said it after he got out of the embassy. There's not been one day, not been 1 minute when Guaido has been president. It's always been Maduro, and he's gotten more and more popular, more powerful. And so we knew when we were in the embassy the last few days that the U.S. and Venezuela were negotiating over a protecting power agreement, that Switzerland would protect the Caracas embassy. Guaido couldn't do that. Only Maduro could do that. And that Turkey would protect the Georgetown, D.C. embassy. So while Trump is saying Guaido is president, he's negotiating with Maduro to get protection of the Caracas embassy in the United States. So it's a bold-faced lie. I know it's unusual for President Trump to lie, but it's a total falsehood. Even he knew that Maduro was president and Guaido was not.
Just add one thing in terms of the embassies. Around the time we were in the embassy, a lot of us didn't know it at the time, especially when we lost communications, that Venezuelan embassies were being attacked in at least six other countries in Latin America and some in Europe. Some were temporarily taken over. None were successful because of the mass movements in those communities. They had bloody street battles and because they had a larger social movement to support them, they protected those embassies. And all these 50 countries, notice they always say, you hear it in all the mainstream press, and the illegitimate government regime and the 50 countries that support the Guaido, all but one of those 50 countries never gave their embassies to Guaido. They say they support Guaido to satisfy Trump or whatever, but the embassies still belong to Venezuela. It's just the U.S. let that happen.
And we asked the judge, we asked our judge to provide documents as part of discovery that showed negotiations between the Trump administration and the Maduro government to show that, in fact, even Trump knew that Maduro was president. The judge refused to provide that kind of discovery, so we were not allowed to tell the jury exactly that key point.
So one more thing. And just to speak to the question of the militia, I mean, I think that's something that's really important. Kevin has talked about that more than I have. But for those of you who don't know, one of the things that Maduro has done is provide arms to how many?
3 million.
3 million people. And I mean, the level of trust that you have to have in the population and, and the level of love that the population has to have to not then use those arms against the government. I mean, if that's given what we are told in this country, that it's a dictatorship, it's a tyranny, why would a tyrant arm 3 million of the people in their country? And really what's going on, of course, is that Venezuela has, the largest oil and
Gold,
diamond reserves in the world.
Yeah.
And, I mean, that's the real issue you hear. And so the fact that there are these armed militia and that they're loyal, basically, to Maduro and certainly to the Bolivarian Revolution, really, I think it does send a really strong message to the United States that this isn't going to be like the little drone attack that they thought was going to be. Just like they made a huge blunder in Iran as well. I mean, it's the same sort of series of blunders that you see. I mean, John Bolton isn't around now, but at the time, it was they believed their own lies And that's what happened on April 29th as well, when they had this fantasy that there was going to be a military coup that they had been orchestrating because they had this high-level general who was helping to orchestrate the military coup. Well, in fact, that general was feeding all of the information about what the United States was trying to do back to the government, because he was loyal to the government, as the vast majority of the military are. So it was only a few hundred poor guys who got tricked into this coup. First ended up in Colombia, where all of their funds were stolen by the sort of drug trafficking, corrupt Guaido administration. And then many of them, very sadly, are today languishing in immigration jails in Florida and elsewhere in the United States because they've been betrayed by Guaido. And so it's these poor people who were tricked into this attempted coup that had no support whatsoever, but that Bolton and Abrams convinced Trump that they did have that support. And so there's this fantasy world that these people live in that doesn't at all reflect the reality in Venezuela, which is one of great support for the Bolivarian Revolution.
Yeah, just a couple more points to your question about the civilian militia. It's very powerful, but also anti-missile defense provided by Russia. 200,000 members of their armed forces, National Guard and police, plus 3 million militia. The U.S. could not defeat Venezuela in a war.
Yeah.
And Colombia is already in weak shape. If they got involved in the Yankee imperialist war as an ally of the United States, that government would be in trouble. Same with the Brazil government. So no one wants to go to war with Venezuela. They've all said no. Trump's been talking about it since August 2017, and Maduro's been preparing for it since it was openly talked about. Russia's coming to the aid. It's a losing proposition. I mean, Venezuela will be destroyed. There'll be chaos like we see in the Middle East. It'd become a regional war, it'd be a mess, but the U.S. would lose, and it would be an embarrassing defeat. And so the U.S. going military would be a terrible error for everybody.
Was that our first question?
First series.
Let's see. There are other questions?
There's over here. I think his hand was up first. Over on the left.
Okay.
Margaret.
So.
Oh.
Four of us in this room were in Venezuela on April 30th during the day of the fake coup. So I just want to paint two quick scenarios for you, because we were at a housing conference, which some of us left to go out into the lobby, and we were looking at CNN versus Telesur issues. So here we see on CNN Pompeo claiming that the military is behind Guaido, while on Telesur we can see Maduro standing with hundreds of military all around him. So that's one scenario. Another that I thought was particularly funny was the CNN version of Guaido and Leopoldo Lopez where they were claiming that they'd taken over the Carlotta Air Base, and you could see them sort of from the knee up and looking as if they had, the world under their control. Then on Telesur, what you could see is the whole body picture. Camera moves back. They were standing on top of a car, nowhere near Carlotta Air Base. The whole thing was a completely fake story. So I just wanted to paint some of the absurdities of U.S. media reporting.
Very good.
Question up there?
Hi.
Oh, there he is.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Thank you for the presentations. Now, this is a political case, and it's great that you have a political defense along with a legal defense. The information that was that you have about the things that the court's blocking from presenting, that seems like it could be a powerful piece of literature. And I envision that being distributed, I mean, everywhere, but even on the day of your court case, in the halls of the courtroom, not the actual courtroom, but everywhere else around there too. For visibility purposes, it would be a nice piece of propaganda, I think, but and also, in social media and so forth. I think that would be a good piece of literature to have, because if you can't present it in the court, present it somewhere.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Another question back there? Pass the microphone down.
To Aaron.
Keep going down the aisle, down your row.
Keep going.
Your row.
Over there. Yep.
I'd like to hear about if there's any at all role in progressive Congress members at all right now. Are they offering any assistance? And if there's been any attempt to enroll them in this. And I'd also like to hear, if we have time, just, it's my recollection in the past there was some congressional solidarity with attempts to stop the coup in Haiti, at least the first coup back in the early 1990s, and in the 1980s there were members of Congress who were maybe compared to today stronger on stopping the U.S. coup attempts. And I was wondering just to hear about the state of that today, whether there's any role right now and any appetite in Congress to help out, to stand up to Trump on this.
Do you want to take another question?
Yeah, one more.
Sure, whatever you want to.
There's one over there.
I could respond to that somewhat.
Oh,
well,
you have a question? Or?
AOC.
Mike.
Speak into a microphone.
He's not there to respond, really.
Yeah.
I don't know if people know, but AOC, who's very outspoken, has taken a number of good positions. She was interviewed in March and came out with a good position. She was interviewed 2 months later in National Review, and when asked about Venezuela, she said, quote, I defer to the Democratic Party leadership on this question of Venezuela. How many people here know that she said that? Not everybody. So a few of us, I've been working with DSA, Paul,
David.
trying to get a meeting set up with AOC. There's letters that have been circulated, and you know, there's a lot of reluctance on this, I have to say. It's pulling teeth, because the DSA, she's a member of DSA, you know, anyway, so it's a point well taken that there really needs to be pressure on our officials to take a stand. She is not, well, she took that stand. Sanders, as far as I understand, has yet to come out and condemn the sanctions. These are questions that should be posed to these people who are in the public eye and make a difference. So on that point. One other thing I'd just like to say about, I was there the same day, April 30th, the next day, and Guaido had called for the mother of all demonstrations. It was May Day. And his mother of all demonstrations was the same day as the Maduro May Day. Guaido pulled out about 3,000 people. Maduro's May Day pulled out 400,000 people. You'll never see that reported in the U.S. press. It was reported in the foreign press, the tremendous disparity between the two. And being there and seeing the unbelievable contrast between reality and what gets reported in this country is pretty, even for somebody who's used to it, it's still pretty incredible.
If I could just respond to your question, Erin. So in addition to what was said, when we got back from Venezuela in March, I actually had a meeting with my Congress member already scheduled to talk about healthcare. And so I delivered a report to him about the trip to Venezuela, as well as we had just been to Iran, and about Iran, and because he's not good on foreign policy, John Sarbanes. And so I wanted to educate him, and I said, I'm happy to meet with you at any point to discuss this further and educate you. And so when we were going into the embassy, because I know as chief of staff, our kids grew up together, I contacted her and I said, we're taking this action in the embassy and I want you to be aware of what's going on and what the U.S. is trying to do. And she was just like, oh, well, if we can help you in any way, of course you should let us know. And then so like we're under siege and we can't get food in. And so I contact them and I'm like, you know, we're having a problem here. Silence. You know, so, I mean, I think that the propaganda is so strong in the United States that members of Congress are not willing to stand up to that and tell the truth, and it's very disappointing.
You also want to respond to other questions?
Any more questions?
I'll say something.
Okay.
The question of protest in and out of court, obviously we can't be part of organizing protests outside the court to influence the jury or inside the courtroom to protest the judge. We can't do any of that. We have to focus on defending ourselves within the limited parameters of what the judge is going to allow. So we're going to focus on what other people do is up to them, but that is something we can't be part of. But it's an interesting suggestion. Someone did write us, in fact, about holding signs outside the court. I said, well, we can't really do that. So we, you know, a lot of our friends, for some reason, are protester types. So
Go figure.
we seem to have that kind of circle. So we'll see how that all plays out. As far as Congress goes, we don't have much hope in Congress. I mean, I gave up on the Democratic Party in the 1990s and have been so pleased not to ever have to consider a Democratic candidate, even Bernie Sanders, who called Maduro a tyrant.
A vicious tyrant.
A vicious tyrant, and has not retracted that statement. I mean, and Chavez also. I mean, he should know better. He knew about the Nicaraguan Contras. He was good on that issue a long time ago, but maybe he's gotten older and I don't know. He's more compromised, or because the problem for Sanders is he's running for president in a government that's been propagandized very deeply. And so he's running on health care for all. He doesn't want to run on Maduro. So he has to compromise, and he's making those decisions. But that's why I think it's important for movements not to compromise. Our job in this manipulated democracy, which is a mirage democracy with elections based on fear voting. We're so afraid of Trump. We're so afraid of Bush. They're so afraid of Obama. He's a socialist, communist. Trump's a fascist. So the fear-based voting dominates people's thinking. And I think our job is to build a movement that challenges both of these Wall Street and war parties, that makes it impossible for them to operate. We need to become the ability to run a general strike that really shuts the government down. That's what we have to build toward. I don't know if people saw the protests in France last night. Oh my gosh, they were so amazing. We have a fantastic article on popularresistance.org about those protests. If you didn't follow them, they were incredible. That's our role.
And in Puerto Rico,
all over Iraq yesterday. I mean, today. When we go to Congress, we go to protest. We don't lobby Congress. Lobbying Congress for us is protest because we see the corruption is so deep. So I just don't look at our role that way. I think our role is to build a movement that can't be ignored. And that's true on not just this issue, but on health care for all. Sanders is pushing Medicare for all, which is good, but his bill is not good. His bill has a lot of weaknesses in it. And some single-payer activists don't even call it Medicare for all. And Warren, with her two-step approach, I'm going to first fix the ACA. You can't fix the ACA. It's based on the insurance industry. That's the problem. And if you're going to try to fix the ACA, it means you don't understand the corruption of our healthcare system. And you're going to do a two-step, so in 3 years you're going to push Medicare for all. The third year is when the president loses their power. So she's running away from Medicare for all. So we got to be clear and protest even our allies, who are the so-called progressives in this two-party system. Sorry about that.
That's all right.
I can say one more thing. Just one more thing about that quickly. That Congress is the Congress members aren't really the people who are running the show in Congress. As you know, it's the staff, and there are a lot of staff who were quietly supportive of us, and those are the people that I think it's really important for us to focus on, and also for those. Movement members who can stomach that shit, for them to get in there and start messing things up because it is such a rotten institution, but you get a couple good people in there, and they can do a lot of damage. I mean a lot of damage to the rotten institution, so a lot of good. I agree that Sanders has said some awful things, but I think in part because of some of the good people that are in there, I think there's a potential for them to move, and we need to, like Kevin said, our role as the movement is to not compromise and to force them to take these positions, and I believe that we're going to get there.
The 2020s are going to be amazing. 2020s are going to be amazing. If we do our job right, wow.
Yes.
So I have a quick question and a comment. My question is easy and simple. If either you folks or folks in the room know about any delegations this year going to Venezuela, just in case any folks in the room are interested in going to Venezuela. I mean, I had a chance to go back in November. It was beautiful. I loved it a lot, and I love seeing that, seeing just people from different ages, different backgrounds, trying to have something to defend. And for me, I come from, I was born here, but my family's from Colombia, the right next door neighbor. And growing up, I was used to been taught how Venezuela was bad. You know, it wasn't just through U.S. media, but Colombia media. Like, it's just a crisis. All the Venezuelans are flocking to Colombia. You know, it was crazy. And for me, like, being born here, being a part of a diaspora, I feel like the Bolivarian Revolution gave me a lot of, like, my identity that we lost in Latin America. And I feel like Colombians always try to tell them that we're Bolivarian, you know? So I really appreciate the solidarity from y'all, you know? Like, I can't wait to tell my father back in Colombia that a group of, you know, what we call gringos, yes. The gringo buenos, or gringo enemies. The gringos anti-imperialistas.
Gringo sí, Yankee no.
We're showing solidarity, you know, to the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela, you know, so, and I can't wait also to send the pictures of this back to my friends out in Venezuela, you know, so thank you from the bottom of the heart of this Bolivarian New Yorker.
Just to answer that, here in New York, you're very lucky to have William Kamakara, and who's from Venezuela, and often leads delegations down there, particularly around food sovereignty.
And also AFGJ reports.
Oh, and Alliance for Global Justice.
They report on all these tours.
Yeah, they have like a Venezuela newsletter, so you can sign up for that.
But sanctions have impacted the ability to travel to Venezuela now, is that correct? U.S. airlines can't go there, is that correct?
It's not that they can't go there.
They just don't.
They decided not to.
They just do what the government told them.
That happened back in March when we were there. Actually, we ended up getting stuck there because American Airlines said it was too dangerous and they canceled all their flights, and we're like, what? So, but you can still, Copa Airlines flies there, and yeah, you can definitely still get there.
Okay, great. Is that it?
Other questions?
I think that's it. It's 9 o'clock. We were invited up. Yes, we collected cards, and everyone should take more cards. You have to put on your own stamp sale list. Take it to others. Hopefully, how are we going to see a bunch of people here tomorrow? Or your galoshes, you know?
Where are we?
Thank
Columbus.
you.
And then we'll have New Jersey. Tomorrow night's New Jersey.
Thank you.
We have a daytime march and an event tomorrow night.
Maybe I see my friend on